Welcome to another figure week, hard surface week, organic week.
Hey everyone, my name is Ahmed Al-Douri. I'm a concept artist and former instructor at Art Center College of Design, Brainstorm, CCS, CGMA, and various other places. And I would like to introduce to you this digital painting course that I've created. But before we get into anything, I just want to thank you for the support you've all given me this whole time. And with the support of so many of you, I've been able to put together everything I know about painting into this digital painting course. You want to become a pro illustrator, concept artist, or even just a hobbyist, but you don't have a clear map to get there. And that's where I come in. I spent the last 6 months compiling everything I know from my 20 years of art practice, and I've turned it all into a map. Starting with foundations such as rendering shapes, color theory, painting basic subjects, understanding brushwork, brush economy, all that fun stuff, deconstructing the skull, drawing it from every angle, all the way to master studies, stylized painting, and you'll find yourself at the end of the course doing a concept art project based on everything that we learn in the first 14 lessons. So how does it work? Well, you sign up, you watch the lectures, do the assignments, post them to the community page if you want, and treat it as a self-study, except for those of you who have signed up for the weekly meeting, where I personally critique your work in a virtual classroom setting. I believe learning by repetition is super important, and that's what I've sort of presented a lot in this course, and the assignments are tailored for that, as adapted from my time teaching at Art Center. And each of these lessons have step-by-step explanations in real time. If you've ever seen my videos, you know exactly how I teach. And this course is intended to be a substitute for a college level course, but you don't have to pay the $4,000 or $5,000 per class, racking up maybe $200K in debt. With my custom design course, you'd be paying a fraction of that. And of course, I also have payment plan options if you don't want to pay for the whole thing at once. Thank you for watching this, and I'll see you soon.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Digital Artcast. I'm glad that you guys have returned one more time. I know it's really last minute that I've put this episode out, but the interview kind of happened last minute. I was approached by our guest basically because they had a limited schedule, and if I didn't speak to them kind of now, it wasn't going to happen for a while. So this is the reason that we're talking to Iain today. I do give him a great intro and have a great conversation with him. A couple of things that I want to start out with. Of course, usually I don't do a kind of housekeeping thing, but I wanted to just clear a few things up just now before we get started, because this might be my one and only episode for the year. So I wanted to just check in with you guys and let you know how I'm doing and what's the plan moving forward, and notes about the episode, all that kind of stuff. So firstly, I'm doing fine, you know. I'm actually working on some stuff just now with a company, and I'm doing some work. So yeah, that's kind of the update. I can't talk much about that just now. But yeah, so doing that. Also try to take care of my health, try to get healthier as much as I can. And of course, I couldn't have an episode this year without talking about my last video, which was, technically it was the last 2 interviews I've done, but also I released a video saying that I was leaving YouTube and taking a break. So I just want to say thank you, first of all, to all the people who left really amazing comments, who left comments saying stuff like my podcast had got them through college or got them through school. It helped them find their first job. It kept them sane during the pandemic. There was, loads of comments on my last video, and apart from the ones, of course, that were people getting recommended my video, and they were like, why the fuck am I getting recommended this video? The majority of them were really sweet, and thanks for just obviously, you guys, I don't want to gush, I don't want to get emotional, but yeah, like it meant a lot to me to see that I was having such a positive impact on people's lives. It definitely fills me with joy, makes me really happy that you guys are happy and that you're finding some kind of reward from listening to my interviews. So thank you, to everybody who left a comment, to everybody who liked the video, and to everybody who subscribed and listened to my podcast over the years. It's been a great honor to serve you guys and produce the podcast. Also, you'll probably hear towards the end of this episode, but just in case you don't make it to the end, I will be in Los Angeles at the end of this year to attend Lightbox in LA. So yeah, if you guys are out there or you're going to be out there, just let me know if you want to meet up or you want to hang. I wish I had a bigger community honestly, because I could have maybe arranged like a meetup for a sketch up and stuff like that. But if you guys are out in LA and you see me, don't be afraid to come up and talk to me. I know the last time I was there, some people had met me and they were kind of like, I was going to come and ask you for a photo, or I was going to come ask you for like, just to come and talk to you and stuff. I didn't know if you were busy. It's fine, just come up and chat to me. I'm quite happy to talk to anybody who wants to be talked to. I'm always somebody who will talk, so don't worry about that. So the episode, so this conversation with Iain is probably unlike most you've heard. This isn't really a conversation about how we get into the industry or what brush to use, or like at this point I think Ian's been asked those questions so many times. He says he doesn't mind answering them, but I felt like it was an opportunity to speak to Iain about stuff that he doesn't usually get to speak about. So we ranted about movies and comics and superheroes and many other things. So if you're looking for that type of episode where it's like how to break into the industry, how to work on ILM, or how to use certain brushes, how to do character design, it's less that, it's more a conversation about stories. It's what I would say is the best way to describe it. And also, I don't know if you guys noticed in the title, but this is technically, if we're talking about me interviewing a person, Iain is the 100th person I've interviewed officially. I think it technically is 99 because Colin, back in the day when he was helping me, done one of my interviews, Matt Rhodes. So technically it's 99, but we'll call it 100 just to fill up that void. But yeah, so Iain's my 100th episode, 100th interview, and I couldn't think of a greater way to really, fill out that round number. So this is why this episode is really just titled A Conversation with Iain McCaig, because it really is just a conversation. It's just two of us talking. We've been I don't want to say friends, we've been definitely talking on and off for years, so we've had many conversations, but this was the first time we got to record it, and it's just been a great pleasure to talk to Iain and delve into his creative mind and learn about how he sees the world. The audio also, at one point for my video, goes out of sync. There was a technical issue. There was nothing I could do to recover it. So if my mouth is moving and there's words coming out and out of sync, just ignore it. Just keep looking at Iain. It's fine, because he does most of the talking in this episode. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and you're going to kind of jump into a juxtaposition with the next clip. But enjoy the episode. If you guys have any comments or anything to add, or anything you want to ask me, leave it in the comments below, or just email me and we can chat. But I hope you enjoy the episode, and thank you again for the many years I've listened to this podcast. I will be back at one point. Until then, enjoy the conversation with Iain.
But this interview that is now coming to your lovely ears and eyes was one that I couldn't pass up. My guest and me had been talking back and forth for almost 3 years now, trying to organize a day to talk. And of course, the person is extremely busy, as you know. You've probably already seen the name on the episode, but I feel like I have to intro him regardless, because I mean, at this point, I think if anybody deserves an intro on this show, it's definitely my next guest. Today's guest is truly an artist who really does need no introduction. But again, like I said, I'm going to give him one anyway. His accomplishments in the field of art and design have been, just too impressive not to share. He was born in Santa Monica. A lot of people maybe don't know this, but studied in Scotland, where I'm from. Which is, a great connection to what we're talking about. A man with distinct artwork, and he's played a key role in some of the most beloved films in the recent decades. A respected illustrator, concept artist, storyteller, director, writer. His talents brought to life some of the most cinematic and iconic characters in cinema history in the last couple of years. Behind Star Wars, he's worked on things like Darth Maul and Padme Amidala in character design, and his work's also graced the screens of movies like Terminator 2, Hook, Peter Pan, The Avengers, a very long stint at Industrial Light and Magic. He's a dedicated educator. He's been sharing his knowledge with the next generation of artists for many years. He's an author with his book Shadowline, which is the art Iain McCaig, which is obviously put out a while back, but explores his storytelling and his art also. He's also recently been using his art to his awareness for important causes, being a bit of a philanthropist. I can never use that word, philanthropist. Listeners, today we are privileged to have an artist on who's left an incredible mark on the world of character design and film. Please join me in welcoming the extraordinary Mr. Iain McCaig to the show.
Yay!
I had one lined up as well for that. There you go, Iain. A fanfare waiting for you. Yeah. So, how are you doing, Iain?
Awesome. After that, man, you can introduce me every morning. I'll get up.
I watched coffee. I know. I watched a documentary one time, and it was about a Rolling Stones editor who had to at South by Southwest. He had to introduce Morrissey. He was like, how do you introduce like after decades of work and songs, like how do you so it's like on that scale it is so high within the art industry of like how do you introduce Iain and make it worthwhile. So it's a tough thing when you're at a party or something like that and people always ask, so what do you do? I never know how to answer that question because really do you define yourself by your career, by what you do in spare time? What did I do this morning? What do I like to do? It's like there's no answer to that question. I mean, I would say for you in particular, storyteller is the most apt word I would use to describe what you do.
I love stories. I think storyteller. I would be happy with that on my tombstone. Sure.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to drawing, directing, writing, concept, I think it all is storytelling. It all boils down to that kind of one thing, which is telling a story. So, and especially when you draw characters. So,
and so is life, right?
Yes.
When you're born, you kind of imagine for yourself what you're going to be like when you're growing up, and what you're going to be doing, and who your friends are going to be, and what success looks like to you, and you write that story for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly why I think it's important to learn story, because every once in a while life comes along and something happens and it bumps us, and it wasn't supposed to happen, either an external event or something we did, and you're shaken because you remember, wait, I made all this up. None of this is secure and true. What am I going to do? And so you have to quickly rewrite your story so that it all makes sense again. And that's partly what your dreams are for, to help you rewrite it. So if you know how to write a good story, if you know what a hero is, you can write yourself a good life. Doesn't mean it'll happen, but it means you've got a path to follow, right?
Yes.
So I think it's important we all learn what stories are, and what heroes are, and what villains are, and how not to be them, and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was Alan Watts who said the greatest superpower that humans have is storytelling, and I think it's very true and apt. I think one of the things, because there's a whole thing behind the word culture, and it's a thing where how do you define culture in a society, and it is the stories we tell, because mythos that was created way back in the day, it was there to basically pass on stories, If you look to some of the like Little Red Riding Hood and Goldilocks, a lot of those stories are cautionary tales for children to not wander into the forest.
Right.
And so we've used storytelling to pass on, warnings about, not only culture within ourselves but external to us, and how sometimes hills would have names and stories behind them as well, and that's where we would remember them. And some of the mythological stuff where, like in Ireland, I know for years that people had this theory that small white butterflies contained the souls of children, so you would never catch them or kill them because people thought that they were ancient, and how fairies had small nests in flower beds because it would be that you wouldn't disturb the flower beds because there was fairies in them. So yeah, storytelling is definitely something I think that we have a dichotomy on versus other animals in nature and stuff like that.
It's one way to give meaning to things, right?
Yes.
Because you can fall into that rut where, well, nothing means anything, right? You don't take anything with you. You don't leave anything behind. Well, but that's not true. You do.
Yeah.
Right. And stories, that's how we pass it on.
Yeah.
So I love them a lot, but also, I think it's really important to be a good human being as well.
Yes.
No, I do. I do.
Yeah, of course.
My wife is the perfect person to remind me of that, because she's like, I can't impress her with a drawing at all. She's just not interested. So I actually have to be a good human being around her. I don't get any points. So.
Yeah, of course. No. Yeah, you think it would go without saying in most occasions, but it's something I think most people will forget.
Can't draw her a unicorn and impress her.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, now you've kind of existed in the industry. We talked about, 40 plus years, how you've had this whole career span, and I mean, looking back on it now, I mean, do you still feel the weight of your name? Do you feel like that, when people talk about you as Iain McCaig, do people still, introduce you at parties and you still feel a bit like ominous of people, like, oh yeah, this legacy or this huge, massive, has it ever lost in you, like the legacy you have behind you?
Nah. Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
No, I think that every day feels like a first date, right?
Right.
And it's nice to get lifetime achievement awards, but hey, I'm just getting started. and also, I have so many forms of storytelling that I still want to do. I'm working on my first set of short stories right now. It's a book that'll come out next year through Titan Books in Britain.
Right.
And I've written a lot of screenplays. I think about 18 screenplays now, and I'm comfortable with that form. I know what I'm doing there. And I've written one novella, which was the story inside Shadowline.
Right.
But short stories as a published form, that's a new thing for me. Mm-hmm. And it's always good to go back and remember what it's like to feel utterly overwhelmed and foolish and like you'll never be able to do this. And then what the 43 years does for me is that, I can go, yeah, that's how it's supposed to feel, you idiot. And then you put your hands in the air and you enjoy the roller coaster ride, and you don't worry that you don't know how to do it. You will know how to do it. You just keep doing it until you do. But I also find that there's like Ursula Le Guin has this great quote, there's no walls so high and impenetrable as the ones we build for ourselves. Yeah. So a lot of it is the way we've constructed our belief system around us that sometimes doesn't allow a new thing to come in. You actually need to go back to your wall, knock it down, or build a door so you can actually access the other stuff. When I teach drawing, that's the biggest hurdle. Most people build sort of a system of symbols. So they don't really look at what's in front of them. They'll cut a little piece of a body out and say, that's an eye. And then they put a poached egg there because that's the shape of an eye. No, it's not. Eyes are light and shade, and you really can't tell if it's part of that light and shade behind you or here, and where do you actually cut it out? Yeah. So, trying to get rid of symbols and just draw what's actually in front of you is a huge hurdle for most people. But like all things, 6 months, 1 hour a day, you can learn it.
Well, someone actually said, there was some weird statistic I read the other day where, like, if you spent 18 minutes per day for a whole year doing a hobby or doing something, you would be at the end of the year, you would be better than 95% of the people on the planet who do that hobby. And 18 minutes essentially is nothing, so.
Yeah, I mean, for drawing, I call it the mile of paper.
Yeah.
You do have to put a mile of paper under your pencil before you actually start to get it. And I think it took me about 17 screenplays before I really got that and understood what I was doing there.
Yeah. I mean,
so I'm sure, my first short stories will be fine, but I'll look back on them fondly years from now and hope nobody ever reads them.
I need to send you a podcast I listen to called Blind Boy Podcast. And Blind Boy is someone who has written for TV and film for many years, but has also done multiple books of short stories. But his podcasts are some of the best ASMR I've ever heard because he's Irish. But his voice is so soft and gentle that listening to him is incredible. But he talks about short stories and writing in a very apt way and has wrote, many, many books. So I'll have to pass it on. But yeah, he talked about just like the drawn sense of style. Writing's the same. You need to get your 10,000 words out instead of your 10,000 drawings. But then you'd also directed the short film The Face, but that was shortlisted for an Academy Award, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, how was that experience as well?
Oh, for the film that I directed?
Yeah, of course. People know you as the artist, right? And someone who's drawn, the people, but now the writing side of you.
Yeah. No, the Face was not nominated for an Academy Award. I wish. It won about 9 awards at different film festivals and stuff.
Right. But still, yeah.
Still,
some recognition, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't be the Academy, but yeah.
The awards actually don't mean anything to me.
No,
either.
Of course, no, I understand. Yeah,
I know in that Kipling poem, If, he says, if you can look at success and failure and treat those two frauds the same or two imposters the same,
yeah,
and it's not that I don't appreciate getting something like that, but I have a vision in my head of what I'm aiming at. And I know I'm always like so far. People ask me, what's the best thing you've ever done? It's like the next one.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because you never quite get there. And yet getting there, reaching for it is such a joy. Every time, every failure is such a fantastic attempt. Yeah. So it keeps you going.
Yes.
But that's what I mean. The reward is the doing it. It's not necessarily whether it's the best film in the world or the best story in the world, the best picture in the world, because that will change too, right? Yeah. Haven't you noticed that films that you loved as a kid, and you watch them now and you're kind of like, and actually maybe I'm wrong about my short stories. Maybe these first short stories I write will be the best thing I've ever done, right? Yeah. Because I've got 43 years of experience in other arts to bring to them. You just don't know, but you never set off to write your second best thing or your best attempt at something. You sit down
try to make it the best.
Or you try to make it true. Right. It's not whether it's the best or not doesn't matter. It matters whether it's honest and you're actually bearing a bit of your soul to the world and letting them share how you see things. I think that's more important, right?
I mean, you've got to be honest when you draw as well. I think you talk about that. Yeah,
you got to be honest in everything, my friend. It's funny when you asked this morning. Well, what do we talk about? It's like, well, no, everything. Because
I know. We
talk. But you have to talk honestly.
Yes,
right. I noticed that in your podcast. You're very good at being yourself and actually just asking people things and not getting starstruck or anything like that with people. Yeah. Because after a few minutes, it doesn't matter. We're both human beings.
People talk about, I had an interview one time when people were interviewing me about, because the biggest accolades I kind of had at my career at the moment is the podcast. So when I've had people had me on their shows, they talk about my podcast instead of my art. But people say that is, what's the biggest thing you've learned? And it's like that artists are just people like us. They're just people trying to get on with a job and, do the best they can every day and get up and make what they think is the best stuff they can make and be honest with themselves. And I think when you knock down that wall of superstar or celebrity or lifetime achievement, like we've had multiple conversations before we've interacted in this podcast. And, the thing we found about myself and Iain is we're very similar in the way we look at the world and the way we want to leave it and the things that we think in our heads and the way we want to approach people. And I think it is a thing that's lost when people, come up to you in Lightbox, they might have the whole, oh, Iain, I'm not worthy and everything and that. And you're kind of like, it's lovely to hear that people hold you in a high esteem, but then you're kind of just like, but I'm just a person like you. I'm standing here in front of you, in the room, just like you are, sitting in the audience. I'm no different from, where you were. I've just been here a bit longer, but I still do the same job as you. I still draw, I pick up a pencil, I sharpen it just the same way. What is it they say? I put my pants on one leg at a time. So it's like, I sharpen my pencil just like you, So
actually, I throw mine up in the air and stick my feet through.
There you go. See, that's why you're different.
Everybody did. Jeez.
Yeah. So I mean, I think when you interview people and you do enough of them, you do see it as trying to find the human element in the person. And I do the less talk of, because even when I have people come on who are more highly regarded, they get asked the same questions over and over again, and it's always, how did you start? Where did you go to school? How did you get your first job? And then when I try to find the human element of like, well, what does art mean to you, or why do you pursue art? Like things, the more philosophical stuff, people are like, it's not the usual.
Yeah. And yet at the same time, we're also all different.
Yes.
Right. Nobody will have your set of loves and hates and likes and histories and experiences all rolled up together in one.
Yep.
That's the one thing that AI doesn't have, and knows it doesn't have, and knows it will never have, is that kind of physical experience. And I shouldn't say never, because life is always surprising.
Yep.
So who knows what it will become? But at the moment, it can't tap into that. But that's what we have just by default. And if you keep your eyes and ears open and try and have a really live that life, right? Yeah. And try and take risks and be a good person, then I think you've got this wealth of stuff that's unique to you.
Yeah.
And really, all you have to do is get the craft to be able to show that clearly enough to the world that then, you're as unique as any artist that's ever lived, ever. Yes. Yeah. And really, that's just divide those two things up. Work on your craft every day. I do. Yeah. If I'm not doing a podcast and having some coffee in the morning, I'm upstairs and I just draw for an hour. And I do my life drawing, and I go outside and I sketch every single person I can find. Mostly walking down the street these days with a sketchbook in my hand. Nobody looks at you. Nobody poses or gets offended when you're walking and sketching, because nobody can do that. Yeah. So you get some really great expressions and stuff. Yeah. And once I've done that, I'm all sharp. Yeah. And now I can go and work,
Yeah, I had a revelation the other year where I was at Lightbox, 2019, but there was a guy there selling a thing called a sketch wallet, which is a wallet / a little sketchbook in it and a little pencil. So now everywhere I go, I've always got a sketchbook on me. So when I'm sitting at cafes, I draw people, nice. Drink their coffee. So, on the idea of like stories and being unique as well. I remember John Relson, one of the guys who came over for Pixar one year to IMAG in Paris. He gave me 2 great pieces of advice. Well, he gave the audience 2 great pieces of advice, and the first one was, work like you've already got the job, which I thought was great, But the second one was, the stories that you have in your head, if you don't tell them, will die with you. Which I thought was very apt for people who want to tell stories.
That's why the collection of short stories. So, 6 years ago now, or 6 years ago, I actually had a heart attack and died, and they managed to pull me back.
Wow.
So, no, it was an amazing experience. And it's a long story that involves Tom Hanks and a robot. So we might get around to that later. Okay. But the epiphany was when I came home from the hospital, literally those cupboard doors there, if I open them, they're packed full of stories.
Right.
And no one's ever seen them.
Right.
Well, that's not true. I've maybe shared them with my children.
Right.
But other than that, nobody's read them. And they do die with me.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So what I did is a lot of them are novels and we're going to be big feature films and all the rest. And I thought, no, I don't think so. How about if I just write the shortest possible version of those?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, a whole bunch of them actually take place in the same place. I've written them over 20, 30 years, but it's a little town that's kind of a combination of the one I live in now and one I lived in over in America.
Right.
And so I just called it Small Town. And it's I don't know if you ever got a podcast or a radio show called Lake Wobegon. It was Garrison Keillor. Oh, so good. It was a variety show, but the highlight of it is when Garrison Keillor, with his amazing voice, would just stand up and say, "Now the news from Lake Wobegon, my hometown." And it was always this incredible, all made up, by the way, made up. Yeah. But then he would just tell these incredible magic realist stories of the people that lived there. So these short stories are kind of like Lake Wobegon with monsters.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of how Hemingway started. His career was short stories and trying to just get things off the top of his head. I mean, I remember reading about Hemingway and how at one point he went to Paris, and he was a man at the time who wanted Instagram in his life, but he had a feast at the point where he was invited to a kind of collection of writers, but he wrote a collection of short stories about the food he was eating. And that was some of the first things he wrote. So short stories are a great form of just getting those short form things out of your head onto paper.
Yeah.
And like, yeah,
and a good form in themselves,
yes,
right? I love that it's either useful or you get rid of it.
yep, yeah,
And yet you can't look like you're just being functional with that. So it's a great magic trick.
no, fantastic.
I've always loved short stories. I grew up on Ray Bradbury short stories, and he, when people ask, so which artist influenced you the most growing up? It's Ray Bradbury.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like an artist, painter, or illustrator. Right. It was a writer, because he'd fill my heads with so many images that I ran screaming to a piece of paper to draw them down before my head blew up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most famous short stories is something like, isn't it 10,000 Nights? Is that the one that's like the most?
Oh, the Arabian Nights.
Yeah, basically the woman who, so the Sultan, if anyone doesn't know the story, it's a really great story, but the Sultan who was cheated on by his wife, so he cut her head off, but then every night he would sleep with a different woman, but then would cut their head off in the morning. So the woman that eventually came to tell the stories, she would tell the story during the night, and then would leave him on a cliffhanger for the next day to finish the story. So he was like, oh, I can't cut her head off because, she has to tell me the end of the story. And that was where the 10,000 Arabian Night stories came from, which included things like Aladdin.
1001.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a long time.
Yeah.
But, for what it's worth, Edgar Allan Poe wrote a story called The 1002nd Night. I've read it. Yep. Yeah, and it's great because it's the one story where she went too far. He chopped her head off.
Well, yeah, I mean, even one, I think it was, I don't think it was Hemingway, but it was a short story I read not too long ago called Yellow Wallpaper, and it was about the history of hysteria with women and stuff like that as well, and mental asylums. But yeah, short stories are a great form factor, and I think that's why you can relate that stuff to concept art, because every concept art, piece of art you look at is a short story in itself. You're trying to tell the shortest possible story, convey the most information. So yeah.
Oh, and I do aspire to write novels one day. It's short stories aren't even building blocks to novels. They're an art form that I love in itself, and if I just wrote those for the rest of my life, I'd be happy. But I have some stories that have to be told in a longer form. And I know that's going to be a whole new learning curve.
Yes.
How do you sustain this? Actually, Shadowline's a novella, so I guess I've like halfway between a short story.
I don't think it's something that you would struggle with or would be lost.
Oh yes, I will. I promise I will.
I don't think. I mean, I don't know, Ian. Well, possibly, yeah, but yeah. I mean, I've felt I've always been better with the pen and the pencil. That's always been things that I found that, like, even with my talking, like, I found that because I'm sometimes so articulate with the way I speak to people in general, when it comes to writing, I can transfer that articulation into that medium as well. So my early career was writing video games reviews before I thought I wanted to work in the industry. So art was the one I thought, I also enjoy being creative in art, so I would try and collaborate the two. But yeah, I've always loved writing, and we've talked about a short story that I'm writing as well at the moment, and that's definitely coming more naturally to me than the art stuff. I think it comes, but then I think it's just because I have been so obsessed with stories all my life, watching films and TV.
Isn't it funny that got put off so you could do the art?
Yeah, I know. Right? It's funny that way.
But I think I understand why. I think because you have a natural gift for words, but a great love for art.
Yes.
Art was the one that took more work. So obviously it must be more worthy because it's harder. So because I was the same. I mean, I do love words, and I've written even longer, well, just as long as I've ever drawn. Since I was about 4 years old, I was writing crazy. Right. I think my first story was 6 years old. It was The Island of What? Okay. And just I drew a map, and then it was some poor guy that got stranded on this island and had to find his way off. And I think he starved for a month until my dad said, no, if anybody doesn't eat for a month, they die.
Yeah.
So I learned about, okay, better do some research here. It's at 6, right? Yeah. To make it more real. And but the writing was always like, had to learn stuff. Whereas the drawing just seemed to come naturally. So obviously I was going to be a writer. Yeah, my whole life. I didn't take art in school really when I was younger. I took it in my last year when I moved to Scotland.
Right.
And I applied to universities to be a writer and an art school, and I got into the art school. Wow. So that's how my career kind of did that. Yeah. But you never lose the other side. It's just that, I don't know, in some ways I had to unlearn a lot of stuff I thought I'd learned when I was trying to be a writer.
Right.
I remember I have a great bunch of writer friends, but one was such a muse to me, Terry Windling. She's a fantastic writer, she's
Mm.
an amazing editor. And I remember once when she came over, we were collaborating on one of her stories. I wanted to turn that into a film.
Mhm.
And I said to her, God, I would give anything to write stories.
Mm.
And she said, that's why you can't. Because if you want it that bad,
Yeah.
you're not writing. You're just sitting there hoping, and hoping every word is going to be great.
Mhm.
I've never forgotten that. And now I don't actually care.
Mhm.
I just want to tell the story. I don't care, whether I can or can't do it. That doesn't really matter. It's the same with drawing.
Yeah.
Whether I can or can't draw something, you just say nevertheless, and you draw it anyway because you have to.
I mean, if you want to do something, you will just do it. I mean, there's a really
Just do
good thing, and it's the weirdest reference, but it's from Sister Act 2 when
Oh, yeah.
Whoopi Goldberg is talking to Lauryn Hill, and she's talking about this book called, I think it's Letters to a Young Poet, and he says, I want to be a writer. I love writing. Can you read my stories? And he was like, I don't have to read your stories to tell you you're a writer. If you wake up and the first thing you want to do is write, you're meant to be a writer. And it's the same
Yeah,
as
yeah, yeah.
singing. So yeah,
It's so true.
yeah, such a good quote. But,
No, and people often ask, like, how do I know if I'm good enough? Right?
Mm.
Would you look at my portfolio? Tell me if I'm good enough. I said, it's easy. It's easy. I don't have to look.
Yeah.
Just go home and stop drawing. Right.
Mm.
And if the pain of not drawing is greater than the pain of drawing, you've got what it takes. Go back and draw.
Yeah. I mean, it's people I know who are maybe at the higher echelons, but I know they speak about how if they haven't drawn during the day, if they've been busy or something, they will get a kind of itch. Yeah, it's like at the back of their head, like I need to.
You're a terrible person. Yeah, you got to do it. and also, if you don't keep doing it every day for fun, right, for the joy of doing it, they say like the day after you start to notice, right, and then the day after that, your characters, whoever you're drawing, starts to notice too, and the third day the audience starts to notice, and then you're in trouble, right? But that comes back to some things I wanted to say about AI. Not that I want to go on about it because it's a new tool and it's growing and it's both exciting and terrifying and all that stuff and illegal but can be made legal and just all that sort of thing. But it's funny that we're making machines to replace work in the name of efficiency.
Yep.
When the work is actually what creates the art, right? By getting in there and coming up with ideas and knowing how to generate ideas out of nothing, by hitting a wall where you can't draw something and then learning how to do it. That journey is what turns you into an artist. It's better to fail and have to figure it out than to have the answer every single time and just pour it out because you've done it before. Right? If that happens, you're not stretching, you're not growing as an artist. So do stuff all the time that you can't do. But the word work has become a bad word, and work is the best of words.
Yeah.
It's just have to work joyfully. You have to embrace the work and love the feeling of work. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
so I want a machine to replace what to me is the chocolate box of what I do.
Yeah. I mean,
it would be exactly like hiring somebody to eat your lunch for you and then describe how delicious it was.
I mean, AI in general is just, I've seen the benefits of it in the sense that not the art related stuff. So stuff like ChatGPT, which is the more just virtual assistant. I've seen where, one of my friends who's a personal fitness coach had used it to plot out some kind of several weekly diets that it would come up with, and ingredients and recipes, and it saves him a bunch of time in that aspect of his work. But the art stuff is the bit that's worrying because it feels like people are kind of rushing to it just now to take advantage of it as quickly as they can. And you and I have talked about this before about Carla and the great work she's doing. Only recently I saw the small short Instagram reel where they'd all been to DC and spoken Congress. So with Steven Zapata and all those guys as well. So it's great that people are fighting our corner, but I think just because so much of it is unknown. But in my email the other day, I talked about how the thing I'm pursuing, I'm gonna just throwing caution at the wind and almost saying fuck AI. It doesn't matter what's going to happen with it. At the end of the day, the pursuit of art is for me and not for always financial gain or for industry gain. It's just something I want to do. So as long as I keep that flame burning, that will never really extinguish. And I can always
move and adjust as I need to, as things change. But
we'll all have to do that, right?
Yeah,
we'll all have to adapt to this new thing that's not going to go away, and it's only going to grow and become more and more.
Well, you were on the cusp of when John made Photoshop at ILM, so I mean, like,
yeah, absolutely. I was there when all that happened. That was really astounding. And I still didn't have a computer on my desk for many years. I didn't have anything there for all of episode 1.
Yeah.
And it was only sometime during episode 2, after Dermot came over with his computer, that I got interested in it. And then I didn't really use it until episode 3.
Yeah. I mean, even the first iterations of Photoshop, you couldn't, I mean, the Wacom tablets weren't even really a thing. It was still a mouse,
No.
Yeah.
I've drawn with a mouse. I did the 256 color portraits for The Secret of Monkey Island with a mouse. I knitted those colors.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, did you mention Monkey Island?
Yeah, I worked on The Secret of Monkey Island.
Oh, I never knew. Oh, that's one thing I never knew about you. So I don't know if you can see my arm, but it's
Oh, wow. I know those guys. Yeah. Well, they'd done the first version of it.
Right.
Whatever it was, 64 or 32 colors, whatever they had. And then when I was, I'd come to the States from London to be a guest of honor at a science fiction convention.
Right.
And I'd been an illustrator then for 10 years.
Okay.
So, I was sort of in my career. All I had to do was start writing the books too, and I could die happy.
Yeah.
But ILM were going around looking for artists.
Oh, of course, because LucasArts was part of it. Yeah, back then.
Right. Yeah. Well, actually, it was Lucasfilm because ILM was looking too.
Oh, okay.
And I was illustrating Peter Pan at the time, and I think they liked my Peter Pan drawings, and they were going to do Hook.
Right.
So I got hired, but they weren't ready.
Right.
So I went to the games division, and I worked on this upgraded version of Secret of Monkey Island.
Fantastic.
Suddenly 56 colors or 64 colors.
Wow.
Oh, they couldn't believe they had so many colors on this thing called a computer that I'd seen computers because my brother was studying astrophysics back in university. And, computers, I know those, they fill rooms. And it's like, no, here's a box now. It does what that
the big chunky monitor. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
And you have to learn something called DOS. It's like, what's that?
Disk operating system. Yeah, back in the day. I remember that.
I like languages. So, so over a weekend, I took it home and I just sweated away and learned how to use it. And you're right. There was no such thing as tablets.
Yeah.
So I literally, it was like knitting. If you do this and move the mouse at the same time, you can make a line. And that was how I did my colors and stuff. You can still see them. Just Google Secret of Monkey Island, Iain McCaig.
Yeah, wow.
They'll turn up.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. No, Tim Schafer and Ron Gilbert are two of my kind of
heroes.
Yeah, love those guys.
Tim's an old friend. Love him to pieces.
Love.
And Steve Purcell, who did a lot of the design for Secret of Monkey Island.
Yeah,
amazing guy.
That initial back to the guys that worked at LucasArts back in the day who made stuff like Dig and Full Throttle, Day the Tentacle.
I worked on the Dig.
Yeah, lots of those guys are still kind of going today, and Tim especially now because he has Double Fine, and so and Monkey Island obviously recently was just released as well. Ron did another version of it as well, so it's good to see those guys still going. But yeah, I mean, like
it's weird. I don't play computer games. I watch them.
Yeah.
Right. So when my kids were going through, I would watch them play because if I'm playing, I'm so involved, I'm not seeing what's on the screen.
Right.
And really, I'm after either the story or their experience going through, which is the story. Right.
Yeah.
But I've designed lots of them. For some reason, it just ran in parallel with designing for film, and often the freedom you got in games was so much greater, and what you drew was more often on the screen in games than in film.
I mean, that's so interesting for me to talk to you even as an interviewee because, I do know about your film history and the things you've done at ILM and stuff like that, but less about the game side stuff you've worked on.
Oh, really? Oh, I designed a lot of James Bond games.
Oh, wow.
I was a big James Bond fan as a kid.
Yeah.
I read the books, every one of them, at least 3 times.
Wow.
Long before I ever went and saw a James Bond film.
Fantastic.
And I've discovered now, by the way, that it was the film noir aspect of it that appealed to me about James Bond.
Yeah.
Because I know that Ian Fleming was a big Raymond Chandler fan.
Okay.
And really, and the two of them ended up friends as well. And it really was, that sort of dark, seedy, but very well observed life right? And Chandler in particular was such compassion for every character, even the nasty ones. They're still nasty, but you could see something of yourself in them always. And I love his writing. I've read everything he's written.
I think it's mostly
and
when you go, Ian.
Yeah. So Fleming kind of took a riff off of that and then added this secret agent character that was almost like a superhero.
Yeah.
And it just gave it this new flavor. Yeah. And that really appealed to me when I was growing up. So I really fell into that whole James Bond thing. And then I saw the films and I had drawn Sean Connery since I was about 10 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
I had no idea what he sounded like. I knew he was Scottish, so my dad approved. I knew he had those like big side crinkles up there, and I wanted them so bad I used to walk around with clothes pegs on my cheek, trying to like get the lines. My dad said you got that from kissing girls. I was like, great. But there was something about his face and something about his presence, right? His way of standing and so on, that I just kept drawing and drawing and drawing. And then when I finally saw him in a Bond film, it wasn't until Diamonds Are Forever. Oh, wow. So I'd already seen George Lazenby as James Bond. And in a great story too. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of the best of the Bond stories. It is. It's amazing. And in the books, even better. Even better, because it's the beginning of a trilogy of stories that they didn't do in the films that should have fit together. Because come on, you kill Bond's wife. You want to see what happens to him after that? Read the books. Yeah. So anyway, so I so got into that. Why was I telling you about James Bond? There was a reason.
Oh God, good question. Never
mind.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I think
what inspires you, right? What gets you going and makes you want to be an artist is half the time just wanting to be part of the things you love.
Yes.
You know, when I say Star Wars, and your eyes light up.
Oh yeah, of course. No, huge Star Wars.
Right? They didn't. For me, it was, I'd like Star Wars, but my Star Wars,
my
Star Wars was James Bond and Dune.
Right.
That book, Dune, man, changed my life.
What was the view of the Dune, the latest film then? What was your opinion on it? Yeah. Is it a long, complicated answer?
When you fall in love with something like a book, especially, where a book's a bunch of inert words,
right? And
until you bring your imagination to it and your images and your experiences, those words don't come to life,
right?
So half of what I love about Dune is that it was my imagination,
right?
It was me supplying that stuff with Frank Herbert.
Yeah.
So when I see the film, it's usually less because it's not what I would have made.
Yeah, nothing's ever going to live up to your expectation.
I can forgive it. But I can forgive it if the heart of it's right.
Yes.
So Ian McKellen isn't exactly how I imagine Gandalf, but he's Gandalf.
Yeah.
He's 100% Gandalf because he caught the heart of Gandalf exactly right.
Yes.
So for me, in the film, they did a really good attempt at capturing the heart of many things. What they missed was for me, was the sort of the philosophical, mystical aspects of the book and a humor that's also in those books too. A lot of the characters, it's sort of an absurdist humor.
Yeah.
Right?
It was very dark.
Black humor. Yeah. It was very dark and little depressing sometimes. I was waiting for something to light up. And also for me, as a storyteller, the heart of Dune is it's the story of a kid who can see the future. And not just the future, but every future. Right? Every time he takes a step, the future changes.
Right.
And in every one of those futures, he is responsible for the death of billions of people. So he's struggling for the whole damn book to try to find a future, a step he can take that will lead to not killing those people. And finally, spoilers now for the rest of the story, when he realizes he will never be able to change that, he goes, screw it. And he embraces it and he lets it happen. And it's those books that come after are the consequences of that decision. And I love that. I love the simplicity of that. And it always seems to me that they take Dune and they take the heart of it and leave it in the hotel room and then go off and make a movie about everything else.
Well, I'm hoping.
But it looked beautiful. It was great. And the actors were doing a good job of those characters. So there's so much to praise. And I can't wait for the third one.
I mean, the second
It's
one,
not
the
over
second
yet.
one's just been announced, right? The second part has just been.
Sure, I can't wait for the second one.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see where they go with the trilogy. But yeah, I mean, like I have been told the director has been, kind of praised that he's done a really good job of interpreting the books. But like you said, it's never. I mean, I grew up on Terry Pratchett, and a lot of times when I watched any Discworld interpretations, then it's always different in my head than how it was on screen. And so yeah, I mean, I think you get I think it's also because that's why it kind of influenced me early on, was a lot of that. It was either Monty Python or Terry Pratchett I was reading. So the comedy aspect of stuff like Monkey Island was what appealed to me because of the writing. So, but yeah, so yeah, I mean, I get where you come from. Like, you're never going to have, I think even with Star Wars, we've talked about this previously as well, is that people will have a built up establishment of like what they wanted the latest films to be as well, but just people feel didn't hit the mark. And yeah,
it's a tough one, right? Especially without the guy who created it there kind of shepherding or pointing the way. But fortunately, he did have an apprentice. Dave Filoni really did sit down and at the master's knee and learn what he was trying to say, learn what he was trying to do. And I think the Filoni and Jon Favreau, who's just an incredibly amazing.
I think his back's getting tired carrying so many franchises on his back. He's just.
Oh, but he's a good guy.
Oh yeah,
he's
of course. No, I've heard very good things about him. Yeah.
That combination worked really, really well in that first season of The Mandalorian.
Oh, yeah.
And I haven't seen the other two, and I hear all kinds of things, but that first one was great. And then all of a sudden along comes Andor.
Yeah.
And Andor is incredible.
Yes.
And Andor is a brand new take on Star Wars. I remember when I worked on the series, I kept saying, can we see what they're fighting for, please? Just once.
Why is it a rebellion?
Not always
What's the rebellion all about? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Can we see what it is? And they kept saying it's Star Wars, not Star Peace.
Oh yeah.
But then Andor did it in a very clever way. It said, okay, well, instead, then let's see what it's like for the ordinary person. Let's get rid of the superheroes fighting the war.
The Skywalker saga thing has been also, I think done to death at this point with Luke and stuff. And I think it's like you said, a lot. Like even when Rogue One came out, people really praised that film because I think it took a step away again from the main track. And Mandalorian also, to an extent, had done that and branched out. And why I think Clone Wars had got so much attention,
Yeah, they love the Star Wars universe, but I don't think people don't keep wanting the same story. They want it to go somewhere, take them somewhere. But you saw what happened when George did that. If you step in a different direction and they don't like it, of course, it can cause a huge outcry too. So, but that's storytelling, right? That's entertainment. When you step on the stage, there is no guarantee the audience is going to clap. And that's how it should be. Always risking, and that's the conundrum of the film industry, because it's a lot of money for these really big shows, and so they try to mitigate the risk by getting things they think will guarantee success. Well, guess what? Nothing guarantees success. There is nothing. Not any named actor, not any great screenwriter, nothing. Not the greatest director in the world can guarantee that film's going to be a success.
I think as long as you,
and that's how.
I think as long as you tell an honest story. I mean, I think like I've talked about this in the past, where the Obi-Wan series, which is mostly meant to be a film, I felt was really incredible, and I felt I'd done a really good storytelling aspect of it. A really true, like the line where Anakin eventually says to Obi-Wan, "You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did." Like chills run through my body. I was like, "Oh my god!" Like and Ewan's obviously in tears, and oh my god, my friend's dead. But I felt that was one of the more honest Star Wars things we had seen, as well. And Ewan and Hayden had talked about that in interviews where they said, the people who watched the prequels who were kids at the time are now grown up and saying that was my Star Wars. It was a great, but we all know back at the time the prequels were met with such, like, oh my god, I can't believe, and so, and now, they look back fondly. So it's crazy how
time changes things, and that's important to remember too, right?
That's what I'm saying. It'd be interesting to see if the late Star Wars films age well into the future, like if they will then be 10 years from now seen differently. So
well, stick around, my friend, you'll find out. I mean, I grew up actually. I did have some science fiction films back then. They weren't all. It wasn't a good genre. It was a very hard thing to sell when George was out trying to get his series made, his one show made. but we did have Planet of the Apes. We did have that series, and especially those first 2 shows in the original Planet of the Apes were amazing. So yeah, I mean, I think you love what you love. You can cherish it all your life, and you can find meaning in the most worthless of things, as far as literature goes, or as far as some sort of value, ultimate value goes. If it has value for you, if it inspired you and gave you a rock to lean on and a moral center or something, Superman was always my guy. Growing up, I think I was 3 or 4 when my dad got me a subscription to Superman comics. So I grew up on that guy, and Superman is just the ultimate character to me. And I know the world's divided into Superman people and Batman people and Carlos and Batman people. So we have this discussion often, but I like Superman because he's this unstoppable force, right? He's come to Earth and he's got all these powers and stuff. To do what exactly? He wants to help and protect the planet, but how do you make people be good?
Yeah.
I mean, you can stand in front of the bullets so they don't shoot each other, but the moment you step away, they're going to shoot each other again. You know what I mean? And so do you make them be good? They did a really good story about Superman. If he had come just seconds later and the world had turned and he landed in Russia.
Red Sun. Yeah.
Red Sun, right? And it's like, yes, the moment he made them act a certain way, he's not Superman anymore. He's a different kind of character, and not one that I loved. So, I found meaning in Superman because he had to walk that horrible line of how do you help something and not control it? And years later, of course, I discovered it's exactly the same as being a parent, right? It's exactly the same as trying to have a life too. You can't control everything. You have to allow things to happen. You have to allow yourself to make mistakes. You have to allow people you love to make mistakes. Just watch them like hawks and be there when they need you.
Yeah,
right. Which is what
I think Superman also sets an example of being better than everyone, in a sense that no better than that he thinks, but that he sets an example of what it is to be a good person, and tries to then emulate that through his team in the Justice League and other people, and see that, like, we don't have to kill people to change them. We can be gentle. We can be the better person, the bigger person, and whereas Batman, I think,
it's what DC's fumbling the ball on now. Yeah. No offense. They're working hard, but come on.
I mean, James Gunn hopefully now will take the mantle and run with it. I'm fingers crossed, but we'll see what happens.
Fingers crossed. We'll see. Because
even John.
But again,
I was just going.
That's my Superman. Right? That's Superman that I've got in my heart and soul, and it doesn't mean that it's even the one that really exists. It's just the one that I fell in love with. The same with James Bond too. James Bond really stands for a lot of things that I'm absolutely against. The way he treats women is just
no, of course.
Awful. But my James Bond didn't.
Yeah. Well, you're a fan of Daniel Craig's run of it as well. Did you find his?
Oh, of course. Well, not the run, but Casino Royale.
Right, okay.
Absolutely. That is, despite my absolute love of Sean Connery, that is the best Bond film, is Casino Royale.
I believe that's true. Yeah, I do think that's very accurate. Yeah, I did think that.
Well, for me, because it actually was the only one that actually kind of reflected the book. It's a different time period than the book, but the raw film noir grittiness of it all was absolutely that story. Plus, when you've got a character that is a just constant character in a storyline, they really don't change a lot. The world changes around them, and the question is really, can it change this person? Can it do anything to them? The answer is no. They are who they are. But Bond was changed twice in the series of books. He was changed in the first one when he almost went in a different direction, and then that got shut down by what happened. And he says his line, I think they let him know that the girl is dead. And, they let him know that the girl was going to betray him and all that. And he goes, yes, the bitch is dead. And you go, wait, no, 2 pages before you were madly in love with her. What did you just do? And you realize James Bond has just died. Yeah. And for the rest of the series, practically, you've got this man who's not alive, protecting everyone else who is. And then in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, somebody breaks through and wins his heart, and he marries her.
And then she gets killed.
And then he gets shot at the end. But rather than become dead again, Bond becomes a vendetta machine. And the next 2 stories, I think in the books, it's You Only Live Twice and The Man with the Golden Gun. Bond goes on this crazy journey of revenge against Blofeld and strangles him in the end with his bare hands. Having traversed this garden of death, which they sort of butchered and stole from one of the films, but he's like dying himself, and he barely manages to escape. But when he comes to, he's lost his memory. And the cover, the girl who was like of the little village that was supposedly giving him his cover, had fallen in love with him and told him, "Well, you're my husband." She never said anything about being a secret agent. And for years, he lives on this little island with this woman and has no idea who he is. And then one day, I think on a piece of newspaper, he sees the word Smersh, which was the Russian Secret Service that Ian Fleming used. I don't think it was Spectre. Yeah. And he goes, "Oh, I think I come from here." So he goes to Russia. Yeah. And in The Man with the Golden Gun, he's been gone for a long time. And suddenly he appears in M's office, and M's like, "What the hell, Bond?" And Bond pulls out a gun and shoots him. And fortunately, M survives it. But then it's like, well, what do you do with this damaged agent? So The Man with the Golden Gun was the story of the redemption of James Bond. So you see what I mean? That they tie it up so beautifully like puzzle pieces. You can't chop them up.
I know it's difficult because I'm thinking about how Spectre, the kind of last one, was about him kind of coming back from being shot, and like.
Well, they did try.
Yeah, I think they've tried to, because I think when Ian had died, I think his son had taken over. In a sense, he was going to work with the film team to try and integrate the stuff in. So again, you wouldn't have. It's like not having George there, right? You don't have the original source, so you're struggling to piece stuff together or make it feel coherent. So, I mean, Bond. I think Daniel Craig's run was definitely one of the better ones, considering other Bonds that have come and been.
For sure.
But it's interesting as well with Superman. Like, it's a thing where I've now kind of grown up, but like Cavill's been such a huge part of that franchise for so long now, and it's hard to think who would replace. Even when he done The Witcher for 3 seasons and now he's left, it's like, I don't know if I can see anybody else doing that role. And for Superman especially, it's difficult. So I don't know.
Yeah. But a fun challenge, right? Fun to try and find a person who can embody that and find a direction for you, Superman. But that's what makes a reboot powerful. It may not work, but it makes it powerful. It's when you grew up with something, you loved it, and then over the years, you see that people seem to have lost the thing you loved. So if you get a chance to come back and be in charge of that character, you bring that thing you think people have forgotten that may have only been in your head, right? You embody that in the character.
I mean,
which I think, to be fair, I think that's what Zack Snyder tried to do. I didn't like the Superman that was in his head.
Yeah, like, I mean, for me, with Matt Reeves, like, you know, with the fact that the Batman came out with Robert Pattinson, I mean, I've been a lifelong Batman fan all my life, and I think his interpretation of the Batman is one of the best. I think it was a great film. Although I have met people who have said the story was boring, it was too dark, you know, it focused too much on the detective stuff. So, I mean, definitely even if you're not a fan of the Batman films or the Batman character, I think it's just a really well executed story.
Oh no, I love Batman. I love Batman. There's no such thing as whether Batman's or is better than Superman because in the comics, they're very different in their outlooks, but they're best friends. They have a comic together called The World's Finest.
Yeah.
Dark Knight put them at odds with each other, and everybody took that note and ran with it. But no, guys.
I mean, I grew up with I grew up with the cartoons early on, and you know, my childhood. But even in Justice League, there's a time when they think Superman is dead and gone, and outside of all that, they're looking for him. Bruce comes to the statue of him that they erect, and he talks for like 5 minutes about, "You were the best of us, and I've always respected you, and I thought you were great, and you know, like, you were better than me and everything, and I deserved to that. It should have been me." So, like, I've always seen that dichotomy between the two of them. They've always got a mutual respect that runs really deep. So,
but isn't it funny because we wondered what we were going to talk about. We ended up talking about Superman and James Bond and Batman and stuff. But they're stories that embody qualities that are very important.
Storytelling is what we're kind of talking about in general. Is that just
Well, but those particular stories, they embody certain heroic aspects that I think matter to you and I, right? It matters to me that we don't fight with each other, that we find ways to help, and I see it.
Mhm.
I see it a lot. It's not reported in the news because it's not as sexy as
Yep.
violence. There's a lot more mileage out of people fighting, it seems, than people
Getting along.
being good to each
Yes.
other. But I think that's laziness, to be honest. It's just harder to portray powerful
Yes.
good. But powerful good is stronger than powerful evil. You just have to do the work. It's back to that word work again. If you don't really work at how to show powerful good, and if you can't cheat and make evil less, you actually have to find good that's more powerful. You can. But even Dore, the amazing Dore, when he was doing the, Paradise Lost, and he's showing Dante's Inferno, and he's going down into the 7 levels of hell. And it looks great because everybody's naked and they're all roiling around having like this tormented good time. And then you go to heaven and everybody's wearing these long white gowns and they're just sitting like this playing their harps. You could tell they're bored out of their minds. And I used to think, no, that's wrong. That's good has to be more powerful. You have to find ways to show that. But good is a thing that usually has to have a context. Evil's just good with corruption, right? But so it's so easy to just destroy something that's perfect. But to show something that's actually good, it's an action. It's a thing you do. It's a moment. There's no such constant state as good. It's a thing you have to strive for every single second. And that's harder to show. But for some reason, we think that because horns and spikes and black and all that sort of stuff is usually used for evil, you can't use it for good. Of course you can. You can use it for anything. Good can have anything. And that's why anti-heroes are so popular, right?
Well, I mean,
because there's a nice combination of good.
I saw someone talking about in a discussion of storytelling about how heroes and villains essentially have the same story arc, that both their pasts contain painful memories or pain in general. If you think about even anti-hero, and it's an essential, I think Batman is essentially a kind of anti-hero, but like him and Clark are both orphans, but they've went about crime fighting or taking things completely differently than the way they approach it. So it's like, Batman has a thing where, he will beat people to a bloody pulp and get to that point where he almost kills people, but he doesn't really. But then Clark also just tries to, has a lot of power, but tries to not use as much of it. And so like you can come from the same origin, but have vastly different ways of looking at how you deal with grief. Like Batman has a really good story years ago I've read about. It's called, I think it was based on Flashpoint, but it's where instead of his mom and dad dying, Bruce dies, and then his mom becomes the Joker, his dad becomes Batman, but his dad actually uses guns as opposed to just punching people. So to grieve, they both lose their son, but they grieve in different ways. So his mom becomes a villain, his dad becomes the hero. Like Red Sun, like a different twist on the story. So yeah.
Rashomon did the same thing, right? 3 different perspectives on exactly the same event, and you come away with a bigger picture view at the end than you did with just the one single story.
Yeah. Some of these stories have always been incredible, especially some stuff like I read about Superman back in the day, where there was an arc where he flew too close to the sun and then develops cancer and actually becomes vulnerable and is dying. So then it's like him trying to start talking about his mortality, even though he's lived for so long as this immortal alien. So yeah, storytelling can be very powerful in that sense.
But that's back to that same thing too of you said they have painful memories in their past that sort of forge them into what they are today. You don't need to have painful memories. No, really. Good stuff can happen to you and form you into the person you are too. And we mustn't forget that or become so lazy that we don't know how to show that, right? Like I say, powerful good is incredible, but you just have to work to know how to make that. That's why in Star Wars, for me, when I look back on what I did in episode 1, if Darth Maul caught the air and lifted up, because like I say, people are just attracted to dark and scary things. Padme was the reason I did that show. Right? Padme was the score for me, and to some extent, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan as well. I wanted a force that was strong, powerful, but not controlling, and embody that inside a character. And she 100% did that for me.
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, George has talked about that as well on an interview. He said that he sees the Jedi and Sith as essentially selfish and unselfish people. So people who think about more than just themselves and people who only think about themselves. So it's a thing where when you break it down to that level of storytelling, yeah, there's always a choice within yourself to be selfish or selfless, and it's how you choose
Right.
to interact with the world and how you tell that story as well.
And that's what I mean when you look at the
Yeah.
news. What sells is the terrible events
Yeah.
and all the rest, but we maybe need to work a little harder at portraying the stuff that is happening that is amazing right now. People are out there cleaning the
Yep.
oceans, creating things that will actually eat plastic, and all kinds of stuff. And right now we have our own comic book level existential crisis if we don't reset the planet so that it can be sustainable and we can live sustainably on it. The human race is not going to be here anymore. It's just as simple as that. And we have the smarts, we have the compassion, we have everything, all the tools we need right now to be able to do that. And I would hope to create stories, and I hope people tell news about our heroic efforts to band together instead of trying to smash each other with every horrible weapon of mass destruction that we have. If we don't, I don't see the point in winning your war, right? Why? You're not going to be here anymore if we don't, all of us, pay 100% attention to this right now. And it's a great chance. I mean, you saw that during the pandemic too, to suddenly realize that, no, everybody's a hero. All those people that kept working and kept us going during those times while the rest of us reaped the benefits of that stuff. The people we took totally for granted and paid like the worst salaries on the planet, stepped forward, and they all showed what a real superhero is. And so, now's our chance to be superheroes. Let's do it. Please.
More.
And that's kind of where I want to dedicate my life now. A lot of my stories talk about that stuff, not directly, because as you know, if you dress it up in wings and horns and superpowers, people don't get offended right away, and you can sneak in and talk to them about really important things that way.
I think it's more, I like to say again, more selfless, less selfish, I think is the idea we need to put into the world. So, yeah.
Well, a lot of people artists, not just students, will write me and suffer from really strong depressions. And I know a lot of that's chemical, and it's very hard to get out of that without any kind of chemical help. But for most people who aren't, who are really just suffering from, lack of work, or a giant block that they can't get past, or this feeling of having given all of your superpowers to someone else. Why did I even want to do this wonderful job? Because I'm not feeling fulfilled anymore. And the answer is, number one, today, go and do something really, really nice for somebody else, and don't tell anybody about it. Because then you're not doing it for praise, and you're just doing it because that's the right thing to do. And number two, go and do something for yourself. Fine, if you're an artist and you've always wanted to be a concept artist of such and such, or you always wanted to write a Star Wars story, or always wanted to do this, go do it. Go do it. Fine. Make that time a priority, because you're giving that gift to that kid that you used to be, that you promised was going to have a great life when they grow up. Well, give it to them.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then that'll reset
Definitely.
it.
I mean, I'm aware of the time also, because you're a busy man. I want to get back to your work, but
that's right.
I know. Me too. I'm lost in conversation. I could do this for hours. If we were to sign off, if we were to kind of close the conversation, as you're kind of extending what you said there, what would be your advice to people watching this who are maybe depressed, or are fearing AI, or have a thing about what the future holds? What would be the kind of thing you would say to them if they were in front of you, kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say if there's something you've always wanted to do, do it. And if you can't do it anyway.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. Well, like that, Iain, an hour has passed. How quickly it has went. I feel like
that is amazing. Yes.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, we should do this again sometime, because you're a damn good podcaster, my friend.
I try, and I take that as a very big compliment. So thank you for saying that. It's one of these things where, I'd love to get people in multiple times and talk multiple times about different subjects, and it's just always one of these things where yourself, you're always busy. There's something on. You're trying to carve time out to do stuff, but yeah, maybe we'll try and because for the audience benefit, I am coming out to Lightbox in LA this year.
Wow,
Yeah, so Ian will be
nice.
there as well, and we'll maybe try and get one in person, or we'll see how it goes. But yeah, if anybody's going to be there, you can check me out and say hi and whatever else. But it was funny, the last time I went in 2019, people kept talking to me and they kept going, I recognize your voice. I don't know where I've known your voice, but I recognize your voice. I'm like, oh yeah, I do a podcast. Like, oh, I listen to, I know your podcast. So yeah, I've always loved that.
Yeah, and you know, we're lucky sometimes to find out the effect that our actions do have on people, right? So yeah, do good things, plant good stuff, and watch them grow.
Yeah, well, again, thanks Dean for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. We'll definitely try and get something else penciled in if we can and do another episode at one point. And yeah, thanks again for people who have came back after the little hiatus I've had and listened to the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. It will be, you know, one of the few ones I'm doing this year, but again, it was one of these things where I couldn't pass up the opportunity to talk to Ian, and I think it was well worth it. If you have any questions for Ian, I'm sure you can leave them down below, and I'll try and maybe leave some details if you want to get in contact with them. And yeah, that's really just it. Thanks to you guys for listening. Thanks to you for coming on, and hope wherever you guys are in the world, you're staying safe and creative, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks, guys.
Make it proud. Cheers. Bye.